So welcome to another Sunday morning with me. And my cup of tea, very important cups of tea. So a couple of weeks ago, when I sort of realised I hadn't done this for a number of weeks, I said I was going to answer some questions on the channel. Well, I answered a whole bunch of questions then. I'm going to carry on answering questions now, and we'll see where we go. So, I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm going to actually start where I left off, to be honest. So, when I was here last time, I left off at really wasn't really a question actually this one. It was more of an answer, because I'd raised a question on the channel. And Cooper's Loan responded, the BNC connector on the Akai 6000 is the clock source, is to connect to a clock source. He's absolutely right. Completely forgot about that. But in bigger and the high-end studios, you always had a master clock source. And basically what you did was you connect your sampler to that master clock source, and it made sure that the sample rate that you were taking the sample in at was absolutely spot on to the clock source. So if you were recording at 44 or 48 or 96 or 128 or whatever it happened to be, it would basically record the clock source and make sure it was absolutely spot on. Completely forgot about that. Thank you very much, Cooper's Loan. The next one was from Rosie Ray Sunshine. Wonderful, wonderful name. I hope you are a ray of sunshine. And she asked, I'm assuming it's a she actually, could be a bloke, he or she asked, what does pad 1 do when you're setting up the MX1? And I had to go and look this up actually, because I went back to my original video and watched it and then thought, no, actually I probably don't explain that very well. So here is the explanation. So in setup mode on an MX1, pad 1 does the following. On the MX1, you can save a scene, which basically means you can save exactly how the MX1, all faders, pots, etc., and their positions into a memory bank. And you can recall that with the touch of a button. So you can reset the MX1 to a specific setup, just like that. Great. What pad 1 does on the MX1 is very simple. Pad 1 effectively allows you, when you recall a scene, to tell the MX1 how you want future changes to the faders to be dealt with. So if pad 1 is unlit, as soon as you touch that fader, the new value, irrespective of what the scene value was, will be implemented. So in an example, you have a fader with a volume. The volume is set to low. The fader is actually in a high position because of where it was when you were executing the last scene. You recall the scene volume low, touch the fader, all of a sudden the volume goes very high. Okay, because that's what unlit does. If you have it lit in setup mode, you recall the scene goes onto machine. Use the same scenario. Volume fader is high, scene value is low. Okay, so the volume is quite low. If I move that volume up and down, nothing will happen until I pass the value that has been set in the scene. So if the value is quite low, I've got to bring that volume all the way down to actually push it up to make an effect to the volume. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense. So effectively what it's trying to do is protect you from accidentally twiddling a knob and all of a sudden something going completely out of whack to the sound texture that you've created in that scene. That's what pad 1 does. Okay, so the next one is from somebody who called himself KG. And the comment was, can you use the expansion for a second unit? So this is in conjunction with the TR8. Okay, so in the TR8 you have 2 master outs, an A and a B out, and auxiliary ins left and right. And I think I've talked about these in previous things about using it for bringing in the mono feeds from an S System 1 and a TB3. You could bring those in through those auxiliary ins, or external ins as they're called. So going on to the same thing, can you use a second unit and use those expansion ins for the second unit? Yes, of course you can. No issue with that. There are a couple of gotchas you need to think about. First of all is that the master volume that goes out, or the master mix that goes out from the TR8 that's connected to your front of house mixer, is always going to be the combined of 2 units. So you need to make sure that you twiddle with the volume on one unit and the volume on the other unit to make sure you get the volumes balanced. Otherwise it will sound out of whack. A second thing you need to do is you need to either via MIDI or via USB tie the time clock signatures of the TR8 together. Okay, so set one of them as the master and one of them as the slave. That way you'll ensure that your drum beats, cymbal clashes, snare drums, etc., are all going to be on the same beat, are going to be beat perfect. Otherwise, what always happens with these things is, even though you might be running both units at 120 ppms, the clock signature on one will run slower than the clock signature on the other, or faster, depending on which way you look at it. And because of that, they will slowly go out of sync. Okay, and also if you then wind the tempo up or down on one unit, it won't be replicated on the other unit, so it all goes out of sync. So you need to make sure the clocks are synced if you're going to do that sort of thing. Other than that, you shouldn't really have too much of an issue with it, I wouldn't have thought. It's not something I tried, it's not something I really want to try, but you know, we'll see. So the next one, this is a bit of a complaint. Somebody complaining, my God. And it was all to do with inside the Moto Express Video XT video I did. And it was from D Stu, and he said, I learned nothing. Well, funny enough, I did. I learned quite a bit when I opened that up. So it depends on what do you want to learn. And to be honest, the only reason I did the video was because I cracked the lid off the unit, and I thought it would be interesting for other people to have a look inside the unit so that they understand what's in there. Now, a couple of really important reasons why you might want to see what's inside a unit before you go and buy one. So I've had comments on the channel about moving units from one voltage zone to another, as in going from 110 to 240, etc. Okay, now when you look inside the unit, what did I learn about the Mini XT? Well, I learned that the power supply is on the motherboard. Okay, it's not separate. So in a lot of synthesizers, the power supply is on a separate board. So if you want to move it between voltage zones, you just have to go and buy the board for the voltage zone you're in, or you can make a board for the voltage zone you're going to. Okay, not a major issue, but that it's an easy thing to do, and you can just unplug it and you can plug the new one in. It becomes very, very simple. On the MIDI XT, that's not an option. They do actually on the XT, they give you a 120, 110, 240 volt selector at the back, so you can do it that way. Also told me where the fuse was and what the fuse was inside the unit. It told me that all the connectors at the back of the unit were actually hardwired to the board, which gives you a point of weakness. Again, if you go and look in a high-end synth, you tend to find there is an audio board in the synth, and the audio board is used for the jacking, and if you have a problem, you can take the audio board out and you don't have to touch the motherboard, you just replace the audio board. Okay, so they've designed it in a modular way, and you understand that. Also told me how the interface to the front was set up and how the pin structure was on that. So I learned quite a lot from taking actually the lid off, even though you might not have seen I did. Now, I don't understand quite often what a lot of the chips inside these things do. There's another guy on the internet, I don't know whether you've seen his channel, called Mark Fuller, and he's some sort of electronics engineer, because he sort of like takes the lid off the thing and says, oh, that's a da, and that's a da, and that's a da 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 da. Me, I'm not into it from that point of view. You know, if I had to go down to that sort of level and start replacing things, I think I'd probably throw the unit away and look for a new board. but I can do quite a lot of stuff when I'm sitting in there, like replacing resistors, replacing triads, replacing diodes, all this sort of stuff. If they've blown, I can normally fix them. But if you start talking about what chips do, then to be honest, I'm not really that interested. It's very interesting when you look at some circuit boards and realise there's a whole raft of the circuit board that has never had anything put on it, which suggests that there were going to be future upgrades or more functionality put in that was probably pulled at the last minute. Interesting that when you open up a piece of equipment and see that, it sort of really starts making you think, what haven't they put in, or what might they put in the future? So I'm sorry, D, you might not have learned anything. I learned a lot. Excuse me. Pesky cough will not go. Yeah, so moving on. On the channel, let me have a quick shift it up here. It's up the top here. So Bruce Morgan has left quite a few comments on the channel. My laptop's down here. I'm going to read them directly off the laptop, actually. Great acquisition. The T1 is a great pleasure to play. Very few folks posting about the T1, so thanks. You're welcome. As you know, I was looking for a T1 for a very long time. It's been one of my synthesizers on my synthesizer bucket list, if you like, to own. And eventually I saw one that came up and it needs some work doing to it, but you know, I'm not adverse to doing that sort of work, so it didn't really bother me in terms of moving this forward. So but I think the thing about the T1, if I'm honest, is that it was too soon after the M1. So I say that for a couple of reasons. So when the M1, as we know, is probably, you know, behind the DX7. I'm not sure which one was the biggest seller. I think the M1 was bigger than the DX7 actually. But the M1, I think, was the biggest selling synth of all time. I think they shifted thousands, hundreds of thousands of units of the M1 around the world, which is why you can pick an M1 up, still pick an M1 up in fairly reasonable condition between £350 and £500, depending on what that condition is. The T1 or the T series was the next series in the Korg line, and effectively was an uplift of the M1, and it really was what the M1 should have evolved into had it been an 88 key version of the M1. That's my opinion. I mean, you got a few more bells and whistles with the T series, but you didn't really get an awful lot more with the T series than you got with an M1. And I think that was what stopped a lot of musicians actually making the jump from the M1 to the T series. Also, there wasn't a rack mount of the T series. You know, that was the other thing. There was no rack mount unit. So the M1, you had the M1R and you had the M1, but you had the T series, you had 3 keyboard synthesizer or keyboard workstations. The other thing I think the T1 suffered from was the fact it was bloody expensive. I seem to recall, and I'm talking from memory, so I might get this really wrong, but I seem to recall that brand new these units were over £3,000 at the time they came out. And it had 2 younger brothers, the T2 and the T3. So the T3 was the same size as an M1. In fact, you know, it was an M1 with the additional T functionality in it. The T2 was a 76 key version of that. So, you know, if you were a musician with limited budget, would you buy the T1 or would you buy the younger version, the smaller versions, the T2 and the T3? And now I probably would struggle to justify the cost of this, considering the T2 and the T3 were considerably cheaper. They were also considerably lighter, considerably less robust than the T1. The T1 was really designed for the tour, you know, that sort of touring 88 key, a proper keyboard player on tour, whereas the other ones were designed for a slightly different musician. That's what I feel anyway. So there's that. The other thing is, and this is where Korg, I think, managed to get it completely wrong, is the T series, the T1 and the T2 and the T3 in terms of aesthetics, don't share any components. The buttons are different, the displays are different, the pitch bend unit is different. I could go on. Okay, the T1 is almost a different instrument to the rest of the T series, apart from the fact it has the same logic board inside it. That's the way I look at it anyway, because when you open the others up and you open this one up, which you can see open behind me, you see what I mean when I say it's built differently. Anyway, so that's why I think there's not an awful lot of them around, or not an awful lot come up for sale, because people who have them love them, don't sell them, and there weren't that many of them produced in the first place for people to love and hold on to. So I think that's one of the two reasons why. I have one. I'm really happy with mine, which brings me on to sort of the next question from Bruce is, can I give you an update on the progression of the restoration? Well, I can, and the answer is I haven't done an awful lot. So you can see it's up behind me at the moment, because I am going to do some work on it today. It's actually incredibly easy to get into and do work on this thing, you know, from a user or an engineer's perspective. I mean, everything's so well laid out in here. Like, this is all the display, and all the sound equipment is down on rails under here, which makes it so easy to get to. Really, really does. You just need to be careful in the wiring looms, because that's a little bit interesting. But other than that, it's relatively easy to get into. So in terms of the restoration work I've done on it so far, I've got like a halo effect coming from the window behind me. So in terms of the restoration work, all I've actually really done today is I've replaced a couple of the buttons, and I found some dry joints on the audio connector, so I pulled the audio board out and then I sweated off the old solder, removed it with a sucker, and then put new fresh solder on, and that seems to have solved that particular issue. So we'll see what happens. So what I'm going to try and do today is I'm going to try and take the button surface contact buttons off and put new contact buttons on today. That's my task for today, and we'll see where we get to with that one. But what I will do is I will at this point, I'm going to put a break in, and when I come back from that break, so into the break I'll just put a quick shot of the inside of the keyboard in there, and then, you know, we'll come back and carry on. So here's the break. So as I said, I'd make a break and I'll show you the inside of a T1. So this is the inside of a T1. And I'll start from this end and I'll tell you what each bit does. So starting over here, that is the aftertouch board. This is the audio in, MIDI in, out board. So this is where all the pedals, all the audio connections are, all the MIDI connections. So these are the MIDI connections down here, audio connections up there. As we move along to this board here, this is the brains of the T1. It's mounted the other way up with the two card slots on it. There you go. So this is where all the logic is done, what happens to the sound. Carry on moving along. Now this is an additional memory board. So this is what gives the T1 its 8 meg of memory. Yes, 8 meg of memory. And then finally, this is the power supply board for the T1. As you can see, it's separate, so that you could buy one of these for a different voltage zone. It says it there. There's my voltage zone. But you could buy a separate unit for a different voltage zone. And change the voltage of the unit. Then at the top, again, very simple. There's this board here. And what that board is that's the button board. And all these, as you can see, sort of like combinations of 4. They're the actual push buttons that sit on the button board to effect a command. Moving over here, there's another button board that goes around the screen. So all these ones here are the buttons at the bottom of the screen. These ones here at the side of the screen, and more at the side over there. And that's a value slider. This one in the center here is the actual screen display itself. And then moving right over here, that one there, that is the volume button, the slider board. It says master volume on it, you can see it. And that really is all there is to the inside of a T1. Right, now you've seen inside the keyboard, because I haven't filmed that bit yet. Moving on to the next question, which is again from Bruce. So I said he put a few on the thing, so I'm just going to go rattle through them. And his question was, thank you for posting references to T1 parts sources. You're absolutely welcome. I've said to people on the channel before, you know, my primary source of parts for these legacy synthesizers is severalfold. Number one is it's always worth giving the manufacturer a buzz, okay, ringing them up and having a conversation with them, because quite often they are still holding stock for some of this stuff. Not a lot, but some bits are still in their legacy stores and they can still supply them. Now that is dwindling as time goes by, because obviously these things are getting older. But it's also a good, you know, the first port of call might be to give the manufacturer a ring and just ask the manufacturer, has he got a, you know, ABC123 unit on the stock? And they will be able to tell you there, because the stores are all computerized, so they can tell you what's in stock and what's not in stock. The second source, which everybody should use, is eBay. You know, people are, some of these synthesizers have for whatever reason now failed. It's beyond economical repair. I've seen several bits of the keyboard have failed. So people buy them, break them, and then sell them on for parts. And I've bought replacement parts for the T1, exactly that. Somebody has broken down a T1 and is selling off this part or that part, and I've bought parts for that. The third is places like Syntor.com, which is a American website. There's a couple of websites I've used in the States where, again, they are holding stock for some of these items. Now, again, there's a couple of websites where you go onto them thinking they've got the part and you get all the way to the point of order and it says out of stock, which is bloody annoying, to be honest, because they should sort of say out of stock when you try to start the ordering process, not when you finish the ordering process. But you know, these sites are probably being run by you know, a very small company. They don't have the chance or the money to have robust online stock systems. But a little bit annoying, that, to be honest. So that's where we are with the T1. It's coming along. I have found somebody who's going to make me new rosewood end cheeks for it, so they're not going to be black anymore. They're going to be a nice rosewood, which I think will set this off as a piece of furniture more than a black keyboard. I just need to take these off and get them across to them, which will be interesting, but that won't take very long to do. And then hopefully it will start to come together in the next few weeks. Well, that's what I'm hoping anyway. So that's that one. And the last one is from someone called Mario Mora. Another complaint I hear. And it says, and it was all in Spanish. So here is a rough translation of the Spanish. And I haven't sort of like gone the whole thing because it didn't make an awful lot of sense in the translation, if I'm brutally honest. But it roughly says, speaks a lot but does not teach anything, pity. Well, what do I say? The rant has always been a vehicle for me to say to camera and to anybody who listens what I think about various aspects of the music world, the equipment, the manufacturers, etc., etc. The rant is not designed to be instructional. Never has been, never will be. Now, yes, I might give you some pointers in the rant. I might say some things in the rant that you find useful. You may even not, you might not agree with me. So, like Mario there doesn't agree with me. Fine, it's your opinion. It's my opinion. It's your opinion. But what I do try to do is in the commentary or against the rant, or the description against the rant, I do say what it's about. And I say the same about the other videos. So if it's a how-to video, it will say in the description what the video is about. If you want to watch a video and you're not sure what it's about, look at the description. If it's not something you want to know about, don't watch it. If it's something you want to know about, watch it. Your preference. I do struggle a little bit with people who come back and say it's not instructional. Well, it's not designed to be instructional. It doesn't say it's going to be instructional in the description. It takes a little, a couple of minutes to read the description or read what the video is about before you click that yes, I want to watch this for 20 minutes. So I make no apologies for the fact the rant is potentially not instructional. But it might be informative, and maybe that's the difference. Have you learned anything from the rant? Again, you might just sort of say this is the sort of the thoughts of some mad Englishman in his little studio spouting off about some rubbish, and I really can't be bothered. Well, to be honest, that's your choice. It's my choice to make the comments, but hopefully I do make them in an informed way. I'm probably going to shut up about this point. The only one thing I will say is... Oh, God. I did body pump again this morning. It bloody hurts. I'm determined to get some of this weight off me and to get a little bit fitter. I think I said I was going to go and buy a second FBO1 unit. Well, there you go. Second FBO1 unit. So I now have 2 of these. I've got very good use for them as well. Hasn't made it to the studio yet. It's been here about 3 or 4 weeks and it's just sat on the floor. Probably because every time I go over there I keep forgetting to take the damn thing with me. Oh, God. So, another week, another rant, another chance for me to say goodbye. Take care. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. I've been told it helps the channel out greatly if you hit the like button if you enjoyed the contents of this video. If you want to be notified about future videos that may be made for the channel, please hit the subscribe button.